Take my hand before they take my home." The wordless rancher rose at the notice board. The noon bell quivers once, and the sheriff's hammer jumps against the public board as he drives a foreclosure into weathered pine, and that sharp report slices the murmuring street and makes Ada Morrell flinch. Though she keeps her chin fixed and her hands steady on a folded deed and a cloth bundle, the bank rider reaches to tear the latch from her grain wagon, and Ridge Talbot, broad-shouldered and wordless as a stone fence, steps off the boardwalk and drops a clean warning shot into dust, 2 strides from the man's boot so the grit lifts and swirls, and every head turns toward the quiet rancher who never wastes breath when iron speaks safer than a shout. The rifle angles down again, and the town exhales, bright and readable daylight washing every plank and face at Willow Draw, while the paper flaps like a pale tongue announcing the end of a life that isn't over yet. Ada's dress is wheat-colored calico, cuff seams mended neat, apron tied twice at the back, leather belt snug where hunger has made a notch of its own. She says, "If you post that notice before a judge, here's the arrears you are stealing under the sun," and the bankman laughs from the edges of his moustache and says, "The levy is due at noon, Mrs. or Miss, whichever you be," and he reaches again as if her wagon already belongs to him, and Ridge doesn't lift the rifle. He doesn't have to. His hat brim lowers a breath, his free hand opens like a door between them. His voice is gravel in low water. "You'll stand off this team till words are finished." The sheriff swallows and scratches at his badge because the town has learned that when Ridge Talbot chooses a place to stand, no storm or bull or man shifts him easy. The crowd thickens along the porch line, mothers with flour on their fingers, teamsters with reins looped, 2 clerks with ink still shining on their knuckles, and in that full daylight there's no shadow to hide behind, which may be why Ada says the thing you only say when you have no other rope. "Marry me before they take my home." Not a tremble in it, just a clean cut like a blade through braid. A simple sentence that makes even pigeons pause on the courthouse eve. The sheriff coughs, "You can't rush a vow for a tax." And the bankman smirks, "You can, and you won't." The paper flaps again, and the bell hand tugs the rope and finds the weight of time. Ridge's eyes remain on Ada. He has not been anything to anyone by choice for 3 winters and 2 calving seasons, and that has suited the town and his quiet alike. But her gaze holds the kind of steadiness that isn't plea so much as promise. And he nods once like a man agreeing to push a stuck wagon, and not because anyone told him to. The sheriff starts into his rule book, pages like brittle leaves, when Mr. Dallas the bank rider snaps his fingers and 3 hands move to lead Ada's team from the hitch rail. And Ridge steps forward without haste and sets the butt of the rifle to the plank and says, "Move another inch and I'll punch dust again." The muzzle stays safe to earth, but the certainty in his stance corrals them tighter than ropes. Ada breathes, a measured draw through her nose like riders do before a jump. She says, "The preacher keeps his desk at Parsons Crossing this week for harvest vows, and there's a notary with him. It's 11 minutes by the mill road if we catch the grade." Ridge looks once at the bell and once at the sheriff and says, "If this is lawful, it's lawful at speed." The sheriff shrugs because he knows what Ridge can do with a horse, and because he isn't paid enough to quarrel with a day brighter than truth. They move, a clean, efficient swing. Ada tosses her bundle into the wagon bed, and Ridge unties his grey gelding Smoke with a soft cluck. He keeps the rifle slung down and safe. He checks the cinch with fingers that don't shake, even when a wind tries to make stories of a moment. Ada climbs to the bench and the team stamps. Iron hooves clink. Dust motes rise, visible as seed in the sun. Ridge mounts and puts his horse along the wagon's left wheel so his knee brushes paint scuffed by seasons. The bank rider calls after them that property under levy must not depart, and the sheriff answers that a street is not a chain. Then the bell pulls a long throat of sound, and the 2 of them are already moving past the feed store and the cooper's piles, and under the long shadows of the cottonwoods that lace this end of Willow. Draw the first trouble rides, easy as breath, then snarls. A boy from Dallas's crew looses a length of rawhide into the spokes, and Ridge sees the flick of leather the way a hawk sees a vole. He leans, catches it with his bridle hand, and snaps free before it snakes inward. Safe framing still. No harm loosed, only the sting of dust as the failed trap lifts and tangles in itself. Ada keeps the reins light and the team steadies because she drives as if horses can read calm, and they do. The wagon creaks. A bar of sun rakes the bench. Ridge says grade will wash bad under the mill because the creek runs high from snowmelt up at Raven's Crown, and Ada says, then we take the dry ridge and save the spokes. He glances at her boots, plain leather, good stitching, a woman who knows where her weight belongs in a turn. He says, your land sits where? She says, Sagewind Basin north side of Larkspur Gully. He nods as if he's crossing a map. He keeps behind his eyes and each name lands like a stake. The town falls behind and the mill road rises, and with it the first real hazard. A wagon from the quarry grinds wide around a bend and blocks the shelf. Team blowing, stone dust like ghost flour, driver waving an apology. He doesn't mean. Ada breaks with heel and hip, spokes groan. The quarry hands snicker because a levy makes strangers of neighbors, and men who borrow at the bank become braver than they ought. Ridge rides forward, plants smoke sideways so the gelding becomes a calm wall. He tips his hat once and says, clear as a lane or we wait with you till the bell stops speaking. The driver mutters and jerks his team. Wheels rasp rock. A gap shivers open. Ada threads the wagon through so close the paint lifts onto stone. The quarrymen fall quiet because some choices look like thunder arriving. Ridge gives the grey his head and takes point again. Sunlight runs along the rifle's barrel like water, but the muzzle remains low. He is a man who understands that warning is enough when you carry certainty. The way others carry noise, they fly past split-rail fences and a scattering of blue cornflowers that keep their own counsel. Two magpies argue on a telegraph post that hasn't had wire strung to it yet because the company promises faster than it delivers. The grade tips and the creek flashes to their right. Bright silver scales over dark stone. And there the second hazard waits in plain sight. A fallen cottonwood sprawled across the track where flood pulled its roots. Ada breathes short but even. She says, left bank is firm if we take it early. Ridge studies the angle, down to the creek bed, then up a clay cut with a pinch point where wagons have clawed ruts. He says, I'll lead and you hold the slack between my stirrup and your wheel. She nods. He moves. Smoke picks his way down, shingle stones clicking, water slaps at fetlocks, and the gelding makes that little grunt horses give when work thickens. Ada eases the team and the wagon noses the creek. The axle kisses current. Ridge keeps the rifle tucked, one palm out like a marshal signaling a fair turn. They rise the far bank, and the pinch narrows and the right rear wheel bites too deep. The wagon lurches, a sack of corn slides. Ada shifts her weight, and the team heaves as one. Leather sings, Ridge hooks the rim with a gloved hand and shoves, and the wheel pops free with a sound like a cork from a bottle. They crest, and the breath that follows feels earned. The road smooths into short grass and needle bunches. The air tastes of sun-baked resin, and for 3 long minutes nothing tries to break them. And in that quiet Ridge hears the smallest sound that announces a temper. Shifting iron on iron, and then Dallas's men show at the far bend with a second wagon, and lariats coiled neat, not for necks but for axles and reins. Safe by intent, cruel by effect. Ridge's jaw sets. He is plain, not angry, not boasting, just measuring the math of ground and time. Ada sees it too and says they mean to stop the wheels, not us. Ridge answers, then let them fail at both. He moves the grey tighter to the wagon, tells her with a nod to keep her team straight. She squares her shoulders and says, if we don't reach the parson by the second bell, the bank will lock the porch and enter the deed at his own pace. Ridge says bells were made by men, not by sky, and a man can ring again if asked. It is the longest sentence he has spoken in front of anyone in a year, and it makes Ada look at him different. Not softer exactly, but as if weight can be shared without breaking. The lariats come like lazy snakes, and Ridge shoots, a clump of dust 3 lengths in front so the horses flinch away from where rope might land. The warning is sun-loud and deliberate. The muzzle never finds a body. His discipline is as visible as his aim. The riders split wide to avoid the grit, and a rope glances off the lead mare's withers and drops without catch. Ada's right hand never leaves the lines. Her left hand lifts to her shoulder to keep balance, a movement neat as seam work. She says clay pan to the right is hard. We can ride the rim and leave them to mud. Ridge trusts her reed and angles them up. The wagon tilts. Every plate and bolt in it sings a different note. The men behind shout and churn their own wheels into the soft under. Rope bites down somewhere unseen with the thud of failure. Ridge doesn't look back. He uses the strength in his legs and the honesty in his seat to keep the grey certain. They drop from the rim onto smoother grade that sweeps toward Parsons Crossing, where a white tent and a portable desk wait bright as bone in the field by the creek crowds from the harvest wagons cluster there, ribbons on bonnets, clean shirts, the smell of yeast and soap and horse. The parson is already standing with a quill and a notary's seal kept in a tin. The second bell is almost at his lips, and the bank rider's wagon clatters onto the lower road with a spray of mud and two men still coiling rope and cursing the way clay keeps secrets. Ada pulls her team straight and sets the brake, a precise pop like the closing of an argument. Ridge swings down, hands her from the bench. Her palm is cool and steady against his wrist. He doesn't release it until both feet of hers find clean earth. The parson blinks at dust ghosts still settling and says, "By whose peace do we rush?" Ada answers, "By the peace of a home not stolen." Ridge removes his hat, and the line of his mouth changes as if a winter finally yields. He says Ridge Talbot, Ada Morell, his voice a serviceable instrument used sparingly. The bank rider sputters that levy makes bridegroom tricks void, and the parson lifts his quill and says, "A lawful vow is not a trick, and this desk is for vows, not banks." The sheriff arrives, breathing hard and seeing the ring of people and the bright rifle angled safely, muzzle down, and he raises both hands like a conductor who wants the music slower. He says, "If it's to be done, do it clean and quick under sun, where every witness stands equal." Ridge nods and Ada nods, and the crowd folds itself into a tidy half-circle that leaves both sky and creek and tent within human sight. The parson starts his words, simple and nearly bare of lace. Ridge listens as if he needs to memorize each for use in weather. Then the bank rider shouts that the seal is invalid without deposit receipt, and three men from his crew muscle toward the desk. Public as a shove in church. Ridge's hat turns a degree. Not much. Enough. He steps, so he is between Ada and any hand. One palm up, the rifle low. He says, "We'll finish, and then you can sing your complaints to paper." And because men follow momentum more than orders, the crew keeps coming. Ada says Ridge, and there is not fear in the way she says his name, only alignment. The sheriff curses because a crowd can become tinder if sparks get careless. The parson pauses with the quill held over the tidy black square that will make ink into law. Ridge sees the choice rise like a snake from grass and takes it before it bites. He sets the rifle butt to earth and lifts his free hand higher and speaks not loud but shaped to carry. This vow happens in daylight, and no one will be hurt for watching it. Stand back and keep your boots under you. The simple command lands because it has weight behind it. The weight of a man known for putting himself where trouble breaks, so others don't have to bleed. The men hesitate. The sheriff finds his courage inside that pause and takes a faster step and plants his own body at Ridge's flank. Daylight goes on being daylight. The bell hand lowers the rope. The parson breathes out and inks the seal. Ada's fingers touch the tin ring she brought from her mother's sewing kit, plain and bright as a promise stripped of ornament. Ridge offers his right hand, and she fits the ring there long enough to feel the heat of his skin. And then he slips it to her finger because a symbol moves both ways when done straight. But the turning point doesn't settle easy because Dallas won't let noon decide his loss. He jerks his chin and the quarry wagon lunges toward the desk, not at people, but at furniture and paper. A safe sort of violence that ruins lives without spilling blood. Ridge reacts before the wheel can crush the tin seal. He steps, grabs the quarry mule's bridle, turns the beast with a shoulder and a breath, and a soft curse meant only for its ears. The wagon slews, a barrel tips, ale foams across grass, and the desk leg knocks but holds. The crowd jumps back but doesn't scatter. Ada catches the edge of the desk with both hands and keeps it square. The Parsons quill skids and then steadies. The sheriff yells enough, and Ridge's eyes go flat and still in the way a lake does right before wind. He says you'll stand your wagon and you'll stand your men, and you'll let these words become law. His tone leaves no boards to walk. Dallas spits, you can run papers, but you can't outrun the appraisal team at Sagewind Basin. We'll be there before your stew cools, and there it is, the throat of the problem laid open in front of everyone. Ada meets Ridge's gaze, and in it is not panic but a calculation shared by two. She says then we go home together and meet them in our yard with every neighbor who will stand in daylight. Ridge nods once more, not a vow to her alone now, but to a place and to the fact of standing. The parson stamps the seal into the tin's wax with a crisp sound like a spur on stone and says, "By common wit and witnessed son, you are man and wife." The cheer that follows is not wild, it is tight and practical, and meant to brace ribs against what the afternoon will demand. Ridge swings into the saddle, helps Ada to the wagon bench, checks the rifle strap twice because turbulence makes cowards of good knots, he says. "Ride behind me till the split. Keep your wheels off the rut with the yellow thistlehead, because there's a hole under it, deep as gossip." She almost smiles, and then the wind slides a sheet of dust past the tent mouth and they're moving. The crowd pours back into harvest music, and the sheriff turns to keep the peace he can, while they take the peace they've made and try to plant it where it belongs. The bank rider scrambles to gather his crew. The quarry driver swears at mules. The bell shakes an echo like a reminder that time moves even when you pin it to a board. Willow Draw shrinks behind them to a low bright line, and Sagewind Basin opens ahead with the shimmer of heat above grass and the distant square of a house that has held more winter than joy. The turning point is clean and undeniable. Two people newly bound riding toward a fight that must stay public and daylight. Ridge looks once at Ada and she at him, and there is no promise of safety in either gaze, only the certainty that they will stand there together when the bank arrives. And that is the choice that changes what comes next. The wagon rolled out of Parsons Crossing with the bell still shivering behind them, and Ridge kept Smoke close enough that his knee brushed Ada's wheel when the shelf road bent. Noon heat pressed like a steady hand. Sagewind Basin opened wide and clean, and then a slick green willow chain lay across the track like a lazy snake. Ada snugged the reins. Ridge hooked the chain with a boot heel and let it skate into the clay wash. No smile, just the next breath. Crest of the ridge and her place showed plain as a slate drawing. Tin-capped roof, slow wind pump, a neat hayrick, and two black bank wagons in the yard, with measuring chain uncoiling and red flags bright as fresh cuts. Mr. Dallas Square under a hat too new, a clerk ready to tack paper, a hired man rolling a sledge to make noise feel like law. Ada stood on the bench to see over the boards, jaw set, hands quiet. Ridge rode between chain and porch with his lever gun slung muzzle down, voice low so it carried. "You'll not cross her threshold or lift a single latch while this yard holds daylight and witness." The parson signed. "The law can walk here like a man, not a boot." The clerk hammered the foreclosure to the post, and each strike had the same mean ring as the bell in town. Ridge put Smoke at the porch step, and the wagon kissed the plank soft like a door held open. Ada's wheat-colored calico and brown wool cloak caught one clean gust and settled. She did not step back. The second trouble came fast and loud, a quarry cart on the slope above. Brake straps sliced neat, and the thing bulled at the clerk who was too proud of his stack to know his wheels were coming. Ridge swung Smoke across the tongue and took the slap of weight into his hip. Leather sang. Ada dropped and blocked the downhill wheel with a stout stick, and the cart bucked and moaned itself still. Ridge lifted the cut strap end for every eye, smooth as a lie. Safe framing kept. No harm done. Only the paper-thin gap between story and accident. Then the sheriff loped in with dust on his sleeves and two deputies behind. He planted both boots on Ada's porch. "I'll see the paper and the marriage, and I'll hear Mrs. Morell in her own yard, then say, 'What moves next?'" Ada pointed with 3 steady fingers. "Your flags bite into my north fence, where my father set a corner rock with a scored cross and an iron ding east. The red cloths are lies on sticks." Ridge brushed dirt off the flat stone by the kitchen plot, and the old mark looked back patient as bone. The chainmen shifted because time makes friends. You can't bully. Dallas raised both palms like a man soothing yearlings. County map supersedes scratches. The sheriff cut him. It supersedes nothing if you move the stones yourself. Fetch the book and the man who keeps it. Until then, your flags are wishes. Dallas snapped his chin, and two hands shouldered a keg marked lamp oil toward the barn, slow enough to scare without lighting a match. Neighbors at the fence went quiet with an old kind of fear that knows what flame does to memory. Ridge didn't lift the rifle. He tipped the keg on its rim, popped the bung with his palm, and sent a bright ribbon of oil away from siding into bare earth. No kindling for false courage today. The sheriff set a heavy hand on the nearest shoulder until the message settled deep. Then the air shifted. Wind brought a pale line from the south, and the basin went the color of old flour, white without edges, hats down, kerchiefs up, horses changing weight foot to foot. Ada looped a rope from porch post to wind pump base to make a lane people could follow by hand, buttoned her cloak throat to collar, dust freckles on wheat calico. Ridge put the team in the lee of the pump where boards gave them a pocket to breathe. Hold here, knees soft. No sudden moves. The storm hit in a single scrape. Papers skittered like quail. The chainmen snapped their line into the old rock and it hummed sour, then broke. A loose tin sheet at the barn lifted and slammed and lifted. Ridge ran by feel because sprinting blind is how men vanish. Slid his shoulder under the tin and took the slap across his cheek and ribs. Small fresh blood, but not much of it. Set two nails by touch when a hammer came into his glove. Ada's small hand, then the iron. The sheet settled, and a mill boy caught the rope lane and vanished safe toward the porch. Proof the day still listened to reasonable voices, even with grit in its ears. Edges returned one at a time. A fence post, a halter knot. The parson's tin seal winking from the sheriff's pocket, faces blinking dust. The yard looked like a drill well done, gear where gear should be, people where people needed to be. Mr. Dallas tried to recover his shape. Time appraisal resumes, but iron had gone out of him. The sheriff raised his palm. Not yet. We'll hear the county man. We'll see the old survey. We'll take written witness on stones if stones walked. The county man rattled in with a ledger sewn 3 times with canvas and thread. He squinted at the rock and smiled like a craftsman who recognizes his own cut. Found the line, north corner, flat rock with cross and ding eastward. Owners Morell, witness Keller and Dovey. Your flags are wrong, Mr. Dallas. Your chain is fine, but your memory is poor. Neighbors dislike being told their ground has moved because a bank says so. Color went bad in Dallas's face, and he grabbed the last tool men use when paper fails and crowds refuse to scatter. Take the stock to hold the debt till a judge wakes. The herd in the near pasture felt that push, and the thought of running passed through them like heat through wire. Ada was at the gate gap with both palms open and a low line in her voice for the lead cow. Ridge loped along the inside rail, slapped the top once flat, so sound steered without pain. The sheriff and 2 steady men set the far gap. Hooves thundered. One steer broke and checked because Ridge put smoke like a stone where water flows. Safe, safe, safe. Calm given and calm copied until the herd folded into slow breath and flicking tails. The yard hung in that last note stillness a song leaves behind. Dallas spat a line about arrears due by default and thought he had found a door. Ada didn't answer with talk. Purses and a silver or 2 and a ring on ribbon came out quiet and fast, not pity. Arithmetic. Ridge added calf money in oiled paper. The parson turned his hat into a bowl. The sheriff counted with his lips moving so no one could say magic did it. Arrears satisfied before my eyes. The county man wrote it in his slow big hand and underlined once. Then Dallas reached for the kind of violence men pretend not to have meant after. A drive of the shoulder, an elbow aimed to send a body into a post. Ridge let the first go past into open air, set his weight, kept both hands open, kept the rifle muzzle to dirt where it had stayed all day. The second blow painted his cheek red. Not much blood, just enough to make a cord in the yard. Ada stepped to his flank and did not touch him so he could keep his feet. Half an inch of shoulder next to his said everything. The sheriff said enough, and this time the word did its work. It ended a thing. And there stood Mr. Dallas with no one at his shoulder, and a yard full of eyes and air that would not go in his lungs the way it had earlier. He backed one step, then two, and found a smaller voice. "I'll see you in a room without sun," Ridge said. "You're welcome to dark, we'll be busy in day." They made right. What morning tried to twist, flags pulled, chain rolled, oil shoveled into sand so no spark would find a friend. Ridge washed his cheek at the pump till the pink went clear. Ada wrung muslin and pressed it gentle. Smoke breathed against Ridge's shoulder like a quiet. "Thank you." The sheriff wrote one line below the parson's witness. "I kept peace and peace kept me." Toward late light, the sheriff rode back quick and grinned like a man who had just found the right word in a hard paragraph. "Judges stay, 30 days of quiet for maps and counts to fight in rooms. You bought time with sun and witnesses. Use it." Ada read, and something unknotted in her eyes. "Then we plant and pay and make winter smaller than it looks on a calendar." Ridge set a hoe to soil and work began the way it always should in the West, with the sound of iron asking the earth to be generous. Shadows long, neighbors drifted back with a loaf and a cough tonic that smelled like courage. The parson laughed from his belly and said, "I saw a marriage do more work in a yard than any sermon I ever swung." Ridge rolled out a cedar plank and set a ladder and carved 3 words and a season into the beam, because a house listens differently when it knows who lives there. Morel Talbot Spring. Shavings fell. Ada's tin ring caught the sun when she steadied the rail. Then the last light went gold, and the wind pump ticked once, and quiet settled like a clean blanket. Ridge leaned the rifle safe behind the door with the muzzle tucked to the floor and the strap laid flat. Ada hung her cloak on the peg and stirred a pot of onions and sage and a strip of venison, and the grey gelding dozed on 3 legs, and the yard smelled of dust and cedar, and a day that had done its work without hiding. They stood shoulder to arm at the threshold and looked over Sagewind Basin and let the sore in his ribs and the throb in his cheek be honest and small. The house knew their weight on its boards now and answered with a gentle creak like a greeting. Love out here isn't thunder. It's daylight that keeps its chair when weather tries to move it. Courage is a rope lane between porch and wind pump, and 2 steady voices making a path when sight goes white. Justice is at its truest when the paper gets stamped where everyone can see the hands that stamp it. A home is a name cut clean into cedar and spoken again at breakfast. If this kind of frontier vow sits right with you, stay with us in the clear light. Subscribe to Wild Frontier Tales and tap the bell, so the next time noon tests our ground, you'll already be on the porch with us.